Howdy, howdy, howdy. How we doing, folks? How we doing this Tuesday? Tonight's stream is gonna be pretty chill, I think. I have got a week off next week, so I'm not gonna be around, so I will not be streaming. So I thought before that, I'm just gonna jump around to a few ongoing projects. Hey, Jesse, how you doing, buddy? Just see if I can sort of finalize a bunch of different things that I've, well, finalized to a degree, I suppose. But get some things that I've got in the works kind of a bit more completed before I head off. It's funny how a few weeks ago I was like, oh, I'm going to work on this ant. And then I said, you know what, I want to make this ant's body, rather than just being a single control, I want to make it like a spine. I want to make it a little bit squishy. And that sent me on a rabbit hole that's made me jump onto another rig, and in turn, you'll see a little bit soon that it's made me jump onto something else as well. Just to sort of like unlock the potential of actually scaling things for once, because in my rig so far, I have just been doing a global scale. And now I'm like, well, I want to scale individual joints and things like that, and that just brought up a whole bunch of issues with that and just getting that working. So, yeah, we'll sort of tackle that. And I think if I just load this up, you can see the thing that I'm testing it on is this wonderful, very simple rig, which is sort of like my basics rig. Which I'm going to be working on, first of all, just sort of get this in a better place, just for coming back to in the future. It's also just to talk about, I'll go through some of my modular stuff and my rigging philosophy later in the stream, as somebody has asked me about that in the past, so I think it's about time I probably talk about that in a little bit more detail. But yeah, that's just what we're going to be starting off with anyway. Doing great, actually, starting a new job. Ah, fantastic, on the 1st of October. So that's like 2-3 weeks away. Congrats, dude. Can you say where it's at? What's your title? What's your title going to be? Or is that all secret right up until when you actually join the company? So let's see, cube. So with this cube, I've sort of been going through things and doing sort of like a clean build script. Because I've been messing around with like model level of details, joint level of details and things. So I've just restructured some things. One thing I've started doing as well is I'm no longer doing control LODs on my global control. I'm moving them over to individual settings controls, which I'm sort of like, were diamonds before, but I'm toying around with changing them over to something that's a bit more pointed. Because the free-floating diamonds, I mean, sort of like what I have with the Halo control, don't really signify much, so I kind of wanted something that was pointing more directly as to what it's going to be influencing for a bit of visual reference. But you can see I've got like my primary, secondary, and tertiary controls in here. So, yeah. I want to try and test that out a bit as well. Hey, Rehuds. How you doing, buddy? Can't say where yet, but the title will be Technical Animator. Kind of odd, since I'll be doing a lot of tooling and rigging and just some technical animation, but well. Yeah, I've noticed a lot of studios, like, to a lot of different places, the word, like, technical animator, the role of a technical animator can be, like, very nebulous sometimes. It can mean completely different things. Like, I've seen somebody, I've seen, like, a job listing for a technical animator, and they want somebody doing, like, shaders. I was like, what? That's weird. Or technical artist, maybe. Maybe not technical animator. So yeah, that just confuses me. Everywhere's got their own sort of system. I am doing very well. Thank you for asking. Yeah, tech art is, you know, you just gotta, every time you got a job interview or anything like that, you always gotta ask, like, so what does this actually involve? You know, drill into the specifics. So, one thing
I'm seeing double here.
Woohoo!
4 crusties.
We've got a bunch of brand new, what would you call them? Commands now as well. seeing double one, I think, will be quite useful when the two Lewises, if they are ever in the stream at once again.
Then less Geo.
Oh yeah. I also like moving the LED settings to individual controls, by the way. Yes, that's what I was thinking as well. It was getting, like, that's sort of a way I did it at an old studio I was at. Which is nice for keeping everything in one location, but eventually, like, when you're on a really big character, the list starts becoming crazy. So it feels like, rather than having to, you know, constantly go back to the global control, it's just like, oh, okay, on here, I'm just going to put a general switch so I can turn them all on and off if need be. So there's still going to be something there, but, you know, getting down to the nitty-gritty on each individual part, the level of detail is specified here. The other reason I wanted to do this is because my FK-IK switches are going to be on settings controls. And I have options to override things on them. So it's like, okay, I want the IK and FK controls to be displayed at the same time. There's the options for that. And so I sort of want everything for, like, toggling controls on and off in more, like, detail to be in a very specific point that's a bit more intuitive. So, yeah, that's my idea with the swap. So it's going to take a bit of getting used to because I'm just so used to going back to my global control, but I swapped out some scripts and things and it wasn't too much of a headache. One thing I want to do as well, I believe I've got, I should have a, oh god, what would it be under? Animation rig. I've got like a root control somewhere, right? Do I have that in my new scenes somewhere? Oh, no, sorry, not that one. Ugh, why do I keep doing that? I don't think I do. No, okay, I'm gonna have to steal that from B and pull that over. Where is that? Root component. Basically, root component is just a control that sits underneath the global controls influence, which will influence the root joint without, like, moving anything else around. So that's just something I've started adding into my scripts since I've started working on game characters. It's actually just kind of a nice thing to have in there anyway. Oh wait, no, there is a root component in here. Okay. Sweet, I can just add that in then. I can just probably steal the script from the two legs character I was working on a while back. Where did that go? Two legs. Just change it over from builds B to builds C. Root joint. Now that is going to be root game joint. I've got a class variable for that now. This should be control scale. That's fine. Do Z up false. Let's see. Root scale X already has an incoming connection. Ah, hold on. I'm starting to do scale stuff, so I might be trying to connect scale somewhere else. So let's get rid of this first of all. Yeah, so it's coming from in there somewhere. Of course, it's not going to be building just yet. Root already has an incoming connection. Now, is that from... Oh, no, that's okay. Root component. Does it have a scale constraint in here? Point, translate, that's fine. Let's see what the actual error is pointing to. Build manipulators. Limited cog manipulator module, and then... Ah, you know what it's going to be. What it could be. This might be a bit more of a stream where I'm just going through lines of code and being like, what's going on here? I was wrong. I do not want it to be the game joint route. I want it to be the normal route, because that normal route will influence my game joint route. That is why. That should... Yep, cool. Makes sense to me. That's me forgetting how my own things work. Typical. Boom. That cycle I need to get rid of. Actually, that cycle's on something that gets deleted, but it'd still be nice to get rid of those. So, if you turn the joints on, oops. We got like this root control now, so you can offset it, and the root's gonna stay there, and everything follows along with it as well. Now I should probably add a driver thing in there as well, as I'm doing for all of my Cs. Because I don't need to add it, because this is not a human character, but normally I'd constrain this root control in some way to the cog. So when the character's moving along, you know, that root control can move with it, which is useful for games. In this case, because I'm just testing it, I don't need to, but I want to sort of set up what I'm doing on these other components. Not on the layers, on the components themselves. Where I've got, spine won't have them, but the neck will. Driver, so you specify the driver strings and a driver manipulator. So the way I've been doing it before is I've been constraining things in the scripts. So like after I build my components, and afterwards I've got like a constraint script that I run to connect up the different modules. Whereas now I'm just adding in some additional like some additional things in the build that can potentially do that instead, just to skip some clutter. So, I mean, I'm not going to be using this for the moment, but driver. So we add those in. These spaces in there, and I can probably just steal. Where's that being done? Oh, you know where it's being done. It's just being done on this, isn't it? Where this one? Do I want it to be driver cog instead? You know what? Why not? I had it specified before. I don't think there's going to be anything else that will be needed to constrain it to. So for the time being, that's fine. Makes sense. Then I can get rid of that string. Place it with this one. And the parent space transform is that one. So if this is none, then it's just not going to constrain anything, which is fine. And constrain. Looks pretty good. So all this will do now is just give us some options to just say, hey, we want it to constrain this driver transform that I've got, which is like driving aspects of the rig already. It's sort of like an input that's just easily accessible. You can easily just say, hey, I want this to be constrained to whichever one that I specify in the dictionary that I normally supply it. Not going to do it on this character, but we'll do it on human characters, which is good to have it in there. Okay. Probably want to bump up these controls. The size of them is a bit small. What are they right now? 1. Seems to be about 10 or something. Which means the settings control probably be about 5. Oh god, yeah, it's like exact. I'm gonna resize these later, actually. Should I just get that as 5? And then I will turn the root one up a tad. Cool, okay. With that, if I need... Oh no, there's like all ones, okay. So to test out my scaling, we're gonna do hat. So I think this is main... What is it calling this one? Actually, this is cube. We could really change that to cube, not main. So, the reason I've got a cube is basically I'm testing out having 2 different shapes that are being constrained to 2 different controls. I want to make sure each of those controls can scale freely, which is why I've got like a little hat on top for this cube. The other reason is so I can test the LODs as well. So, if you go to the geometry, we've got block, which I haven't set up yet, but the base and the high res is just like a slightly high resolution cube. This is something I'm keeping track of as well, whereas I have a bunch of different groups that I'm able to specify LODs turning on and off. So I've got like my block group, which is generally, if I have a skinned character, I'll run a script on them, which will slice up all of the geometry just to to rough block shapes, and that's just sort of constrained to the joints. That's like a quick, fast way of having like the rig play out without any deformation. A common group where I put in all of the geometry that's going to be like in all of the other LODs, like base and high res, and then separate groups for those. And then of course on those as well, I've got options for geometry variations. If you have different characters in one scene, in one rig. As well as like things for, that should probably be main viz, not body viz. Actually, why is that coming through as body? Is that specified as body? I need something better than that. Because generally what I'll do on human characters, I'll have like body visibility and clothing visibility. So you can toggle one or the other off, you know, based on what you're working on and things. So I've got like a system of setting up a pretty complicated hierarchy with a bunch of on-off connections and stuff, switches and things like that for different LODs. So.
Why would they come to our concert just to boo us?
Thank you very much for following Saya Brawley. Let's see. I want to do... Yeah, I want to set up this other one now. So we've got hat. Free hat. To that. Let's turn the joints on. Turn the template off. So I think I'm literally calling this joint the hat joint. Couldn't think of anything better to call it. We want it to be all of that. That's all fine. The descriptor is going to be hat. We don't want it to be a cube. What can we make it? Do I even have triangles set up? Not under my new system. Actually, let's do that. Definitely one of these ones. Let's go to what you've seen. One thing I really need to organize my library, because this has a bunch of redundant shapes that I don't use in here anymore. That I'm sort of not really wanting to delete, because I'm like, oh, maybe at some point I'm going to go back to an old script and I might need them. But I just want to clear a lot of them up. Basically, any that don't have a or B suffix after them are, like, old. Like, you can see I've got all these, like, selectable ones, which was when I was doing my rigs a certain way. Got all these other ones, which I was doing when my rigs a certain way. Not using them anymore. So, triangle base. Well, that's not very good. Do I have pyramid? That might be more. Pyramid quad. Ooh, yeah, we do. That's quite nice. Quad base. Oh, yeah. Cool. You know what? We can just save these again. Wait, why did that? Save that as A. Save that one. And save that one. Just so I know in the future that I can delete these ones and keep those ones, and that'll be fine. Alright, we'll take pyramid quad base A. And pop it in the control handle shape in my script here. Control... so we want to... I can set the LOD here, right? This is a single control layer. I feel I should be able to. Because like I said, I've got... hold on, actually, let's just see if that builds, first of all. I'm doing something. Set local scale. Something already exists called that. Oh. That's fine. Just trying to build the wrong dictionary. Okay. Cool. That shouldn't do that. That should scale independently. And this one, ooh. Haven't set up a constraint on it, that's why. Oh yeah, I need to do that for these ones as well. That's a good thing to do. Yes, what was I saying? I want to be able to put this under a different control LOD, because I've got primary, secondary, and I need to add tertiary in there as well. Because I'm starting to think tertiary is going to be a layer for turning sort of like tweaker controls on and off, because tweakers get very, very busy. They take up a lot of visual space, so you don't really just want them on secondary, you want them more tertiary, or maybe a tweaker layer or something. So can I seriously not change it? Is it just always primary? Control LOD. Let's grab you. Oh yeah, it's always primary. Okay. Let's add in one for that as well. Color, let's do it there. Control. Oops. Where was I putting that? I have to do constrained joints. Oh, it's like there. Okay. Replace this with that. And in here. Control D. Let's change this one to secondary. Color set will go to lighter. And let's see if that all goes through. Oh, is it not lighter? What do I call it? Light. Boom. Not lighter. So, like I said before, I've got control LED set up. So this cube that I'm using to manipulate the main one is under the primary one. So if I select the settings control, we're on the current primary mode. If I select secondary, it's going to show all primary controls and secondary controls. And I've got an option here for tertiary, so the idea would be if there was anything in a tertiary layer, that would also turn on and you're able to see everything in that. So it's a, how would you say, a layered approach to showing or taking away visibility of controls. And all it is doing, like all of these controls are just located under a group for this layer, the all controls layer. We've got primary, we've got secondary, so they're literally just nested under these hierarchies, which just have incoming connections to the visibility. That's controlled through this enum on the settings control, which I think is something that generally should be in most rigs. You really don't want to be overwhelming your animators with all the controls at once. There should definitely be sort of an approach to say, look, you know, if you need more, like maybe in the primary layer, it's like for 95% of the situations, you're only going to need the primary controls. But if you need to go and tweak in a little bit more, you can turn on the secondaries. And that way you're sort of allowing them to animate the way they need without being overwhelmed by information. Because rigs are pretty much software. I've heard that being floated around a lot. You know, you're essentially giving someone a product and they're utilizing it in a certain way, so you need to make sure you're able to give them enough control over what they're interacting with. Sort of like a interactive UI GUI without actually having, you know, a picker or something like that. Because if you've got a layout that's decent enough, you probably don't need to make a GUI for every single character. That's the idea anyway. So, in addition to that, user experience, yeah, exactly. You're giving something that someone has to interact with frequently, you know. And it's not necessarily just animators either. Rotomation artists as well. Other rotomation artists are animators. Like, I shouldn't say they're not animators. They're just, you know, in different departments to like keyframe animators and whatnot. Hey, they're keyframe animators as well. Yeah, that's something I haven't really... Whenever people are talking about rigs that you're giving to people, you know, online, you know, if you're going to stores or whatever and getting downloadable rigs and that, it's always for animators. It's never really, like, done with rotomators in mind as well. I guess probably because people aren't really using them for rotomation. But don't forget poor rotomators. It's always good, like, that's just one of those things, right? Like, you'll always get rotomation artists asking, you know, you got to keep the skinning of, like, the chest and the torso as, like, separate as possible. So, like, if you move the chest around, it's not going to influence any of the pelvis at all. If you move the pelvis around, it's not going to influence any of the chest at all. Because most of the time, you're just doing a quick skinning pass or whatever, you'll just, like, grab all of the body, you know, soften, smooth out the skinning or whatever, so there'll be a lot of bleed over and everything, and then you'll get the rotomation artist saying, like, no, don't do that, we can't do stuff with that. So, always good to keep them in mind as well. I mean, I guess rotomation is very limited to film, but film, commercials, things like that, TV. Not necessarily games too much, I guess. So, now I want to do drivers for this as well. This single control layer is getting big. Driver string. What am I referring to these as? Let's do none. And new job is going to be in games. Will be weird to do games again in 4 years in VFX. Yeah, it's a big change. Well, I mean, it is and it isn't. Like, I've done a bit of game work recently, and honestly, all the stuff I'm doing on the game stuff is stuff I would be doing in film, largely because I was mainly like the animation rig guy. I wasn't really getting into like doing muscles and things too much. So I was all like skinning, extracting, sculpts and things like that to put them in as correctives. You know, all the standard kind of good stuff. Because basically, like, you want your rig in VFX to be fast, right? And all the techniques you're going to be using to make it fast in VFX is going to be useful in games as well. So, yeah, especially, and nowadays as well, the overlap is getting smaller and smaller. I mean, like, the overlap between them is getting bigger and bigger. Like, the difference between them is getting smaller, I should say. I think I've pissed off people before when I've said, like, you know, there's funding for like film and games in Australia. And I said, like, there was a period of time where I think games weren't getting a lot of funding, but film was, and some people on Twitter are obviously getting upset. It's like, oh no, games should get funded and stuff. And I said something along the lines of like, yeah, it sucks games aren't getting funding, but hey, at least with film, you know, there might be some crossover or whatever, you know, getting into, what do you call it? The virtual production and things like that, that's using game engines, and more studios are using Unreal and stuff. So even though it's focused on film right now, if there's enough sort of buzz around games and things, maybe games will get some funding in a bit. And they seem to take that as like me saying like, it's fine that games aren't getting funded or whatever. But to me, it's just like, oh, you know, with my line of work that I do, when I'm jumping between games and films, like the difference hasn't been that much different for me. So I just see them as very similar. But obviously, yeah, games and films can be quite different when you get down to it. I mean, no offense to anyone. So, what am I doing? String. Do you think you get a chance to work with any like interesting deformation tech, Jesse? Like any Ziva game muscle stuff, or like dem bones where you're extracting like either like correctives or muscle sims or whatever and putting them onto joints and stuff instead? World constraint. Well, why is this? Oh man, I must have set this one up a while ago. That's all out of order. World, delete world. Yeah, that's fine. Oh, I didn't even, okay. I added that in, but I didn't actually add it to my dictionary. Not sure, they haven't mentioned. They did say that they were open to new tech, and they also mentioned that I'd be working with Control Rig. Ah, interesting. Yeah, Control Rig looks very promising. I really like their approach. I mean, I haven't messed around with it myself yet, but I like what their approach to space switching is supposed to be. Like, it doesn't need to be hierarchical or whatever. Like, you can just kind of like hot swap spaces out, which sounds really, really cool. Only thing that I've seen that's like put me off so far is I don't know how fast it is. After coming from like optimizing a bunch of rigs in Maya to work like real time, if you don't have that 24 FPS when you're manipulating stuff around, like, yeah, I don't know. So, because I've seen a few videos and I'm like people manipulating controls and it's like the frame rate is super chuggy. I'm just like, oh, that's not good. But I don't know if I'm not understanding what's going on. which I probably am not. Let's do cube, and let's set this to cube module. Why are you not coming? Oh, damn it. I want this to be the manipulator module and the manipulator as well. Now, is that going to have it so it's set up? And yes! Fantastic. Okay, that is what I want. So I don't need to create that constraint anymore. That's all just set up. It's automatically set to the cube. Fantastic. And I believe, can I scale this? Cool. Ooh. Oh yeah, because it's... Ah, you know what as well? I probably need to set up so the scale doesn't go below 0. Because that's going to create a bunch of fun. But now this should also scale, and that one should still move, but not the scale isn't going to be affected. So like if I squash this down, it'll move with it, but it's not scaling, which is what I want. Because it's like, okay, you grab an individual section of the rig, you scale it around, the other stuff moves with it, but they don't scale with it. They don't compensate. Yeah, I think that's the idea. Because I was doing this on my spine, but then I realized it's like, I probably want to do this on a per control basis, or like a per transform basis, rather than just directly connecting values into the joints, which then led me down a rabbit hole. I was like, okay, well, I probably need to make it so single controls can connect into scale and do everything correct first. So, yeah, that's how that's going. Oh. And I'm just about finish my tea, so that might be a good moment to take a quick break while I go get some more. Yeah, so I've had a guy asking me on Twitter for a while to go into a bit more detail on how I approach like my modular system, because I think they're going to be making their own. So what I might do after the break, I'll get some more tea, and I might just do a rough breakdown of sort of a really quick, not like super in-depth or whatever, but just sort of break down how I approach my rigging, which I've sort of done a little bit already, but I'll do it a bit more, just to get into a bit more detail about that stuff. Yeah, just give me 2 minutes, and I'll be back with a fresh cup of tea, and we'll go into that then. Back in 1 second, guys. And I am back. That person who followed me before, Saya Brawley. I just realized, I saw you followed me on Twitter as well. I just realized who you were, because I think I talked about a rig you did on stream last week, because I was talking, if you're still in the chat, by the way, I don't know if you're still here. I saw you did like a gun, a P90 or something, with a motion path bullet, what would you call it, magazine or whatever, and I thought that was really, really cool. So, yeah, nice work on that, if you're still around. Yeah, I thought that was a really, because I was going through some of my motion path stuff last week at the end of the stream, and I was like talking about creative ways of like using motion paths in ways you wouldn't really like sort of think, and I thought the approach of using the motion paths to sort of feed the ammo down the belt and stuff was a really effective way. So yeah, nice one. So yeah, I've had a guy, I think his name's, what's his name, Ben, asking me to talk about my modular systems a bit more. So I'll just pretty much, I'm not going to go, like, it sort of needs me to go into my rigging philosophy a little bit. So basically, I'm just going to break down what my rigging philosophy is immediately. And it's very, very simple. So first of all, Ben is unable to watch these streams. I think he's working when they're normally on, and he's just like asked, like, because he watches the VODs or whatever. So he's like, could you maybe go into some of this stuff? I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? So we go to base, and let's group all of these. So, my rigs start with joints. We have a rig, and we have controls. So, the reason I use... I was just about to ask what a rotomation artist... Oh, sorry, a rotomation artist... so, in film, when you have... a plate. So a plate is just a piece of film that you're given that you make stuff over the top of, right? So something studio has filmed, they give it to you. A rotomation artist, it's their job to get a digital double rig, and keyframe through with that rig to sort of match the motion. So match move artists or rotomation artists, sometimes they're called different things at different studios, but it's basically their job to go through and frame by frame match a character in the space so that when you're having like a virtual character interact with someone who's physically there in the film, that's a way to sort of like start doing shadows around them or having physical interactions where you can add like a digital arm on top and things like that. So it's generally it's their job to go through and sort of match this. And so they need very specific skinning. When they're doing things like fingers and things like that, you don't want too much like softened skinning bleeding over into other areas because all of a sudden you're going to get volume loss and things like that. So, yeah, if you're working in film, you're generally not just thinking of animators, you're thinking of the rotomation animators as well. Because generally they're split into different departments, at least in my experience anyway. Some studios may have some overlap with them. Yeah, sorry, getting back to this. The reason I start with joints, so like I've had some riggers on Twitter don't like joints. I think joints are really, really useful just because they're sort of like inbuilt into every facet of like 3D work these days. Like they're used in game engines, they're used in film and everything. Like I know a lot of riggers don't like them because they've got the joint orientation, which essentially adds 2 different levels of rotation to handle, which is annoying when you're doing things like matrices and vector calculations and whatnot, stuff that is generally, you know, a bit beyond me and the stuff. Like I can do this stuff when I need to, but like day to day, I use them for everything but disable joint. Exactly. Like it's just another thing to worry about. Like if you were doing direct matrix connections through various matrix nodes or whatever, if you have joint orientation, it's going to start messing up things. Like, you literally need to zero out all of these and have all your rotation on the actual rotation channels themselves. So what I generally do is I've got my joint guide system that I've created, which essentially just eliminates me having to set up all this joint orientation stuff all the time. It's just sort of like done automatically through my system. And then I've got scripts afterwards that I can run. It's like, okay, if I just want to get rid of all the joint orientation now, I'm just going to run this script. Or if I want to, you know, change some of the rotation values or whatever, it's easy enough to run. Like, I can change to a different pose and then reorient everything and things like that. So essentially my whole joint guide system is a roundabout way of getting around some of the things that's like inherent to using joints in Maya and other programs, but it's useful in another circumstance because, like, I mean, it allows you to quickly move joints into position and tweak them in very minute ways. But basically, joints to me serve as the basis for building my rig, and they're also sort of like the sort of like core aspect that drives everything. Because I'll use the positions of my joints to determine where I build controls from, and those controls then go back and drive the rig itself. So, like, I think some other ones, like, I think maybe, what is it, M-Gear? I think M-Gear just has, like, position information. I don't think you need to, like, feed joints into it or anything specifically, but it's able to save out positional information to a JSON file or something like that. I think I've seen a video where it does something like that. So in essence, like, I'm just replacing a JSON file with position information with, like, the use of joints, because it's a bit more visual. Like, if I was to pull in, what can I do? Can I pull in a character quick? Let's see, if I just pull in the 2 legs. 2 legs is probably straightforward. I think, hopefully. Yeah. So we got 2 legs here. Grab the root. I go into my joint pose UI. Let's specify the tag joint. So this is like what I call the A pose, which is like the bind pose. And I've got the T pose, which is the setup pose that I use for rigging, which I can easily toggle between. So it's like a visual way of showing, oh, hey, Lucas, how you doing, buddy? It's a visual way of just seeing the information in front of you. I feel like I'm a very visual coder. I'm a very visual rigger. I sort of need this visual hierarchy to sort of make things make sense for me. So this is just the way I run. Some people just don't need it. Some people can just have a JSON file they work from for doing like massive constraint files or whatever, but I prefer to have it like out in my scripts. And so from this, right, like I can build various things. Like I can say, okay, if I want to build an IK handle, I know I've got my start joint because the start of it's going to be there. I've got my foot joint. I know it's going to be 1, 2 joints away in every case. So I just need to specify this joint. It knows 2 joints later, that's going to be the foot. It creates it from that. I know the pole vector is going to be from the knee, so you place it there and use a script to use vector math or whatever to push it out into the right position. Basically, you're using these joints to construct a bunch of things from, and those things you construct then affect the rig. You can also use these joints as well in other ways, like it's really good for setting up a motion capture thing, and then you can then use a very simplified motion capture skeleton to drive your rig or drive your controls and things as well. So, like, there's a lot of good things that come from joints. Like, one of the massive things that I love is just you turn on X-ray joints and boom, you can see what you're doing through geometry. Like, that alone is like a great reason to use joints in my humble opinion. I'm sure there's ways you could set it up through the API or whatever where you can do that with other things, but like, you know, if it's there, it's easy, it's vanilla, it's all good. Has my music stopped? Has it gone through all of that already? Damn, hold on. Let's go. God, what haven't I listened to in a while? Good. So we got some background noise. Yes, so joints there. So from those joints, what you do is you build the rig. So I create what I call manipulators. So manipulators are it's just a roundabout way of saying basically a transform. So you have the, should I name these correctly? I mean, I'll just name it like that. You have the actual transform, so I like using locators because, again, it's a visual reference for where that transform is, all that transform information. And I add various things on top. So, like, you definitely need a zero group, and then you probably also need another group on that, which I call the space group. So what this does, I create these manipulators via my scripts from the joints. So if this is the base, I'm just specifying, I want it to be built at that base there. It'll automatically build it there. And then based on some variables that I've got, it's like, okay, then this this manipulator then is constraining the joint. Let's just do that using standard stuff. Boom, Bob's your uncle. This is all good. And this is all part of what goes on in the actual rig of the rig, right? This is what we're building. We're building essentially a complex system of transforms that interact with each other in very specific ways, and we use that to drive the rig. So this is where you start building things like IK systems, FK systems, whatever you need to sort of, drive the rig in the way you want. But we don't show any of this to the animators. This is always hidden because this is stuff that we're working from. And it's sort of another reason why I use locators as well, because in place of controls, you're always able to select your locator because it's got a visual sort of selection handle that you can grab, move around, and you can sort of mess around with how the rig is constructed based on this. And where the controls come in is like, this is the public-facing aspect of the rig that you are giving to animation. It's like the only part that you should be giving to animation. Animation should only ever be interacting with controls you give them, and attributes on those controls. Like, some people go as far as to like locking all additional things outside of the control areas because, an animator might accidentally pick walk down or something and move a channel or something, and then the whole rig breaks and you have no idea why, and you're going to spend an hour trudging through their scene and finding out what's going on. So, might be a bit overkill, but think car buttons versus car engine. Exactly, yes. So this goes into what Jesse was sort of mentioning before, like this is the user experience. The controls are the user experience that you're giving to the animators to work with. And when you have a system set up like this, it's really easy to do. Like, I will create a control. Let's do it, just a circle. And we'll call this base control. Same thing, this one's probably going to have a parent on it as well. And again, I will build these controls based on the location of the manipulator. And it's easy to slot in these ones because you just grab the zero group above the locator, constrain that to the zero group of the control, grab the control, grab the locator, and constrain that to that. So it's this little sort of like side chainy cycle that you create that allows you to slot the control in there without affecting anything in the rig. Still able to move this around, the space around that's above it. So anything you do, another control is affecting this locator space. It's all good. It's still going to move the control around. You move the control around, it's going to move that manipulator. And it's easy enough to get rid of it as well. Like, you don't have to build a control for every single manipulator, every single transform you make. It's a choice that you are making, which, depending on the needs of a rig, you can provide it, you can take it away, but the rig is still going to function because the underlying stuff there is still in the rigging aspect and not in the controls. So at its core, that's all my rigs are. They're just very, very more complicated ways of just having joints driven by locators, which are driven by controls. And they're designed in such a way that, based on the hierarchy and everything, based on how it's controlled, like this is, I'm able to easily slot them in through scripts. And this is where you sort of see in here, you can sort of get the idea of potentially what's going on. Like with this cube dude I was doing before. Let's build him back up. So my rigs are also set up with... One thing I'm still on the fence with in the way I'm sort of building my my framework is I have a lot of hierarchies, a lot of them, and the names can get very wordy just based on the needs of them. So you sort of see under my top control, I've got a public group and a private group. So this is what I'm talking about. All the rig is located under this private group. Animators, anybody who's grabbing the rig who is not a rigger would never touch what's in the private group. Only the public-facing aspect. So under the public-facing aspect, there's the model, which obviously the animators need to see. The joints, which can be toggled on and off as well, if that's necessary. And again, on the global control, you can sort of like change these things based on a bunch of attributes. And the controls as well. So those are like the three public-facing aspects. Whereas in the rig, you open this here, and based on that, I've got a bunch of things in here. Like you can see, I've got my root control rig. I've got my main stuff where if I go into the manipulators group, I've got a manipulator for the cube. Actually, let's just turn that off private. So you can see like what I'm talking about. Like this hierarchy is fucking huge, right? But it's that way by design because I'm separating things out into groups and things that make sense for use within my scripts. Because I know, first of all, I'm creating an anim module, and this part of the anim module is for the rig aspect. Like if I go into here, I've got a control module, and then the anim controls module here. So like these hierarchies are going to reflect each other, but one is for the rig, one is for the controls. So you open that up. We've got the, what do I call these? The components, I think. Oh no, this is the group. Sorry, components come underneath that. So I know like when I'm opening up these hierarchies, it's like, okay, I've got my root rig stuff here, and I've got all my root controls under here. If I go into this a bit deeper, I've got my different layers. So I've got my driver layer, and I've got all layers. So if it's a more complicated thing, like a leg, for example, so you'd have a driver layer, you'd have an all layer, so that's controls you see in all aspects. I'd have an FK layer, an IK layer, and they're just all grouped under these areas to make sure everything is in one location that's easy to access, as well as like being able to toggle these layers on and off visually, which is useful when displaying controls and things like that. But I know like this character's probably too simple to really show that off. Let's see if I can actually build. Can I build 2 legs? Most of this stuff I set up and then sort of like forget about in a way. Did this all build? So I know if like, okay, I built a character. Animation has come to me and said, hey Robbie, there's something wrong in the FK aspect of the character. Can you take a look at it on the FK legs and see what's going on? If this was set up in a way you're at a big studio or whatever, you sort of need to know where things are going to be ahead of time. Because the more you have to go through searching through rigs, the more time you have to spend searching through rigs is wasted time, essentially. If you've set up a rig in a smart enough way, somebody should just be able to grab it and know instantly, okay, I know where these things are going to be. And that was sort of like how I've structured this rig. So I can say like, okay, he said it's an issue with the leg. So I'm going to go into my rig section. I'm going to open this up until I get into my animation section of the rig. You can see I've got sections for twist joints, interpolation joints, so we'll just ignore those. I know, okay, it's going to be part of the leg, so it's probably going to be part of the left leg group. I'm going to open that up. I know he said it's going to be under FK, so I've got the FK section here. I'm going to open that up. And then I can go from there. It's like, okay, well, all the manipulators are here. So I've got stuff for the root, the hip, knee, ankle, everything is laid out in a specific way. So it takes a little bit to get there in the hierarchy, but like, this is a way of like organizing it so people can sort of like kind of know where things are going to be, or at least have an idea of like, okay, stuff is probably going to be located in this area. Like, I think if Maya had a more, a better node editor, by default, you know, Vanilla Maya had a better node editor, something you'd see in like Houdini or whatever like that. You probably wouldn't need to do hierarchies this way. You could sort of have big blocks or whatever in your node editor where things are sort of, you know, a node network is, and sort of work that way. So I guess sort of like Unreal can do stuff like that, right? Like that would be preferential probably to doing like a whole hierarchical system like this. But, you know, for me, this is, again, like I'm a very visual guy. So for me, this like might look like a mess, but this is all very rigidly structured in a way that like helps me figure out where things are going to be. Conversely as well, it's like, okay, well, it wasn't actually a problem on the manipulators. I think it's a problem on the FK controls instead. I can then go, okay, well, it's in the public area. It's going to be under the control sections. It's going to be under the animation portion of the controls, under the leg. Let's open that up. Let's find the FK section. And, you know, if it's the primary or secondary controls, like everything is structured in a way that I should know instinctively where this stuff is going to be. And that's what a lot of my time setting up this stuff has just been, just thinking about, okay, how can I logically structure everything to sort of like make it fit into that system? Like the whole idea behind this rig is like a rig that's not just good for animators, but a rig that is useful for riggers to use as well, and just pick up and figure out how everything is sort of structured and hooked up together. Because you can see if I go into my manipulators, you can see it's pretty much structured the way I had before, right? You've got a transform, you got a buffer group above it, and you've got a space group. And anything I constrain, any constraints I put onto this space group, I then have a script that runs at the end of my build, and it says, oh, it's got this amount of constraints coming in. We're going to quickly generate a bunch of space switching attributes. What could I show that on? Is generic human... Let's see if generic human is actually building at the moment. No, that's the old system. What can I show? Yeah, I'm in the process of swapping over old systems to new systems, so some of these characters aren't building the way I want exactly just yet. Okay, so let's turn this on. Let's go to the secondary, grab this control. So before, what I was doing was I was specifying when I was building this, so as my single control layer that I've got here, this is basically building both a manipulator and a transform, a manipulator and a control at the same time. And I can specify a bunch of things here based on my arguments. Like the reference joint, that's the joint that it's using as positional information. I can say I want it to constrain to that joint to be constrained to the controls and stuff afterwards. I can specify if I want to build a pivot control, where those pivot spaces are. So right now, it's constrained. We got the cube translate space and cube rotate space. That's something I've specified. I've said, look, I want it to be driven by the cube manipulator transform. And I want the driver string to be cube, so that's all specified in here. Like if I was to change this over from cube to, let's say, main base or something instead, and run it again. Let's bring that back up, go to the secondaries, take a look. We can see it's changed over to main base translate space. And one of the things I've got in here as well is do world constraint, so that's something that's useful to include as well. Do delete world translate, get that. Do split, yes, because it's being split between translate and rotate, which can be useful sometimes as well. Run that again. So every time I'm just rebuilding these rigs, and you can see now I've got a world space instead. So right now, everything, if I move the cube, it's going to move around because it's currently under the both the main base translate and rotation space. So if I rotate this as well, it's going to follow along. But what I can do is change that to the world rotation instead, and it's therefore going to be in that space. So, I mean, this is really straightforward. This is just like literally currently adding constraints and just doing blends on those constraints, right? The idea is I've set up sort of like a wrapper for them, so eventually in the future I can change them out to be matrices and direct connections and things like that instead. But spaces like this should always be in your rigs, always, I feel. And I find a lot of rigs I look at, I think it might just be like inherent to some auto riggers that are out there. They just don't really have the options of like adding or removing certain spaces very easily. So that was something I took into account when building my systems as well. So like this is like, if I go into probably, what is it, like module nodes. So you can see like this is where I build stuff to do with manipulators, a whole bunch of information there that I'm just sort of like familiar with because I've used my systems a lot to structure everything. Controls, this is how I build all that information here. So it's just like layers of scripts within scripts within scripts that sort of like are referencing each other. So doing a basic thing, like at the start of all this, I've got a script that builds a locator. And then from there, it's like, okay, from these locators, I've got like ability to build a zero group above them. I'll use that script at another point. I've got my manipulators. They're just like built up of a bunch of different scripts doing various different things, right? And when you go into like the module hierarchies, so I've got my modules, my components, my layers. Those things are all what I use to build the different hierarchy systems in here. And then those feed into the animation modules and the deformation modules I've got as well, where I'm building layers or I'm building components. So components are a combination of multiple layers. So when I'm saying layers, I'm not meaning it in the sense of like display layers or whatnot, but I'm saying that the different layers of the aspect of the rig, the component. So like I was saying with that dude before, like I know all of this stuff probably is going to be very obtuse and not making a lot of sense to people because it's just all terminology that I'm using. But it's sort of there to sort of get your juices flowing a little bit. It's like, oh, okay, these could be interesting ways to approach things or structure things. So when I was going into the character before, the animation module, we've got groups here which are used to specify control LEDs and stuff. So I go into this group for the leg, go into the component, and then these are what I'm specifying as the rigs layers. So driver layer, this is what you use sort of like the inputs and for this component. So anything that's in here, like I believe I've got a pelvis manipulator. So if I was to move this one around, it's sort of acting as the pelvis. So this is just an easy way of finding, okay, once I build a pelvis in another module, I just use that output and drive this driver as the input. Really easy to find. Then I've got an FK layer, so that's all the FK controls going through the leg. I've got an IK layer, that's all the IK controls going through the leg. A blend layer, that's how you blend between one to the other. And then the all layer, which is just a quick way of saying this is stuff you see in every single control layer. You don't need to specify it to, an FK layer or an IK layer. Sometimes you just want to see it all in every single case. So that's just like what I specify here. So when you get into more complicated structures, like these layers are really important to uphold. If you're just doing one control, not necessarily important for those. I fucking hate this song every time it comes in as well. Yeah, so, and then within them, you've got the different things. We've got the elements, no scale elements, and manipulators. Manipulators, stuff that you're physically moving around to interact with things. And then the elements are more like the meat and potatoes of the rig itself. Stuff you don't really need to interact with, but are important for driving things. Like in the IK thing, I've got like a bunch of joints which sort of like drive certain things or whatnot, I believe, as well as the IK handles and things like that. So yeah, basically it looks complicated, and it's complicated just by the necessity of like needing to structure everything and keep things grouped in a way that makes it easier to sort of like access. Because rigs are inherently complicated, right? You can do them in very simple, like when you boil them down, again, it's just joints, locator transforms, and controls doing everything. It's just you add and subtract complication from those areas and do various different things. So yeah. Anybody have any like specific questions? I know I just like rattled off a bunch of stuff. This is going to be for Ben to take a look at, so I hope that's useful, Ben. Yeah, if you guys have any like questions and want me to go into more detail about a certain aspect or just my thinking, my logic behind certain things, like feel free to ask. I'm always happy to sort of, go into more detail. If anybody's still watching. Yeah, so it's like one thing I've been doing recently is I've been working on I've been doing some freelance work and just getting rigs that aren't built by me, but I'm just working on them and things like that. And one thing I do miss is like the simplicity of them sometimes. Like it is an objective fact that my rigs, because of the hierarchies, are fairly complicated to navigate. It's just part and parcel of needing to have that sort of like structure to them. And if you like have enough know-how or whatever, it's easy enough to navigate fairly simple rigs and sort of understand where things are coming from. So I'm still, I'm sort of tossing up between like, have I gone too complicated in my namings? Have I gone too complicated in my hierarchy structures and things like that? But, that requires much more in-depth thinking and requirements to refactor a bunch of my code. So I think I'm happy with it for now. I have a great prose library for one character. If I want to copy it to a new character, is that possible? Yes. What I do, I do have... so it's maybe not necessarily like a prose library at this stage. For my... Oh, see, are you talking to like my stuff in general? Or, sorry, is this a question for more like... you're asking for you specifically, Studio Gold? Is it a hypothetical for me, or is this an actual question for something? I would like to know. Fantastic. So I have a great pose library for one character. I want to copy it to a new character. Is that possible? So, do you have any like pose library plugins or anything you're using? I know there's some out there. Because generally, to my understanding, I think most pose libraries, if they are control-based, as in like they are saving information that is applied to controls, if you have another character with the same control names, you should just be able to use them between the characters. It's just going to be like, if you have the pelvis, and the pelvis has been translated up 10 on the y-axis, and you save out that information, the pose library should just be like, okay, well, I'm going to apply it to that other character. It's got the same control name. I'm going to move it up 10 degrees. So, the pelvis might be in a different place, but it's still going to set that information. I think that's what it would be. I think the one I use is literally called pose library. Yeah, I think it should be able to. Yeah. Like, it's not always... It's probably the easiest way to go is just, like, literally transferring it across based on control names. Sometimes what you might need to do if the character is, like, very, very different, it may have to be a thing where you are literally... what do you call it? Is it motion matching or something like that? I think Unreal's got a really cool new feature where you can sort of, like... transfer animation from one skeleton to another skeleton, like, no matter how wackily complicated the difference between those skeletons are. Like, I've seen people apply a human walk cycle to like an upright horse or something like that. So in that case, it would be like, okay, you grab the joints and you can strain them to, you can strain controls to those joints in a certain way using a script, and then bake out all that information, get rid of the constraints, and then like you've got your pose saved out again. Omniverse is a version. Yeah, Omniverse I need to look into as well. There's a bunch of... there's just so much cool stuff coming out. I'm just like... It's sort of overwhelming. I want to learn everything, but I can't do everything at once. Here, there is a similar thing in Unity, similar to HIK. Yeah, like... Human IK is great when you want to transfer stuff between humans, but as soon as you got a character that's slightly different, it's just like... like that two legs character I was showing you before. Like my... Animation Mentor Fundamentals-esque character with two legs and a ball for the hip. like in order to transfer motion capture to that using human IK, you need to set up a full human skeleton. Like you need to specify spines, shoulders, arms, and everything, even if the character doesn't have it. And it's just like this whole thing. I really need to get into the Unreal one, whatever it's called. What is it called actually? Unreal. Is it motion? No, motion matching is something different, isn't it? Unreal transfer animation skeletons. Retarget, that's what I'm thinking of. Animation retargeting. Okay, yeah, it's a simple name. Cool. Yeah, because human IK is very useful in very specific circumstances, but once it starts getting a bit more beyond standard human stuff, that's when it starts falling apart, I think. I wonder how far does it work. Yeah, that's what I want to find out. I want to see how far I can push it. Yeah, like getting having a person just sort of like move around like this and then apply it to a dinosaur rig or whatever and see if it just like looks decent. One thing, I'll do one more thing, because Ben was asking about like a spine specifically and how I sort of approach it. So, what's the best way to sort of... Actually, it might be better because I do have access to this... well, because this guy is, the two legs guy is sort of building through. I'll maybe talk about like building a leg instead of a spine and how the approach is. How I approach building each layer and things like that, right? So like I mentioned, if you go into the component for the leg, so under the rig group, you get the rig component, and then all the layers are in here. So when I'm building a leg component, we've got leg biped component. A lot of the stuff here is very simplified, but there's going to be a lot of things going on underneath. Whereas in the build for this, you can see like everything is sort of done in a very straightforward way. I sort of know what's going on just by looking at the scripts. Like I'm building the driver's layer, then I'm building FK, then I'm building IK, and building a blend. If there's a foot, I'm doing very specific things based on that because there's a few extra transforms and things going underneath that I need to do. I build a settings control, I copy attributes from the transform to the control, and I build any driver constraint spaces to make sure that's being driven by the pelvis and whatnot. So looking at this script, it's designed to be simple. It shows each section very clearly what's going on. And then from these, I go, like say, if I want to see how the FK is built, I go into this section. Again, same thing. It's laid out in a way that's very, very simple. So this FK layer module is being specified in my init. And you can see here, this is where stuff starts getting a bit more complicated. Like I'm laying out a bunch of information ahead of time and then having very clean build scripts because of that. So I'm specifying in the FK layer dictionary. I've got a bunch of information in here, which feeds into an FK chain layer. So this layer that's being built here is not specific to a leg. I can use my FK chain layer for anything. I could use it for an ear. I could use it for a tail. It's the core functionality of an FK chain, you know, locator, 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 parenting to the next one, parenting to the next one, parenting to the next one, and a bunch of additional functionality underneath that. So if I go into my FK chain script, I can click on that and we go up to it here. And again, similar thing, everything is laid out in a way that's very straightforward, where you know it's going to build the FK manipulators, then the output manipulators, what's going to drive the controls, any constraints I need, and then build the controls. But of course, everything is specified in the init. So this is where I'm setting up dictionaries and class modules, which I use to activate a build script based on these things. So like my FK root, I'm building an FK root manipulator dictionary. All the information is set here. and then is fed into a module, which I save as a a variable, and then that's just utilized, in the build script to build this aspect. So in essence, what I'm doing is I'm just building a fuck ton of dictionaries with a bunch of information. I like dictionaries because when I go Control-Shift- in PyCharm, it minimizes everything. You can open up your script and everything is nice and clean. You can see everything organized. It's great. And then you're like, you know what? I need to check something in my manipulator dictionary. You just opened up. All the information's there. You're done with it. You can get rid of it. There's nothing, like, the only reason, like, for example, well, if I go into one of my other scripts, like, let's see. Like, there's no, like, theoretically, like, you can set up stuff, where you're not building a dictionary every single time or whatever. You just do it based on the actual function of the method or whatever it is. But they don't have the function to minimize, like you've always got these things here no matter what, and it just makes your file longer and everything. So I don't know. That's why I focus on dictionaries all the time. It's just a quirk of PyCharm, or how I use PyCharm, essentially. Yeah, so like my approach to builds is just like all your important information is specified in a dictionary in your init, and then all of that information is then presented in a much more straightforward, simplified fashion in the actual build scripts themselves. It's designed so, again, like if someone was to come in and start going through this bit by bit, they'd instinctively know. I mean, this is for me. This is for me saying, like, I need to remember where everything is, because this is this is a lot of stuff that I've got in my code base here, right? So just like having some kind of consistent logical structure to things is so important. Because when you're rigging on the fly, this is something that that's happened to me in like studios I work for as well. Like I generally got into roles doing very bespoke characters, as in like characters that haven't really been made before, or at least made within sort of like the traditional structure of like the frameworks I was using at the companies. Like I was working on some dragon wings for like a horse on a Jumanji movie that wasn't set up at the studio I was working at. So I did a bunch of stuff on that, and other characters in similar veins and things. Just setting things up that aren't like usual. And with that, so you're sort of like rigging by you're just rigging as you go. It's more of like a stream of consciousness kind of thing, where you're just wanting to make sure it works first. And then generally after that, you want to go back and sort of structure it in a way that makes a bit more sense. If somebody else was to come in and grab it, they'd be able to make sense of it a bit more. And it's not even just for other people. It's for yourself as well. Because, like, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you in chat will probably have experience, like, with your own code, where you come back to it after, like, a few weeks or a few months, and you're just like, what the fuck was I thinking? Like, some of you guys have seen me do this on stream, like, where I'm just going through, like, old code. I'm like, wait, why did I do it this way? Like, am I an idiot? This is so dumb. Like, it's just setting up stuff smartly while you're, and then sometimes you just don't have the opportunity to do that, when you're, like, you got deadlines and things like that. Sometimes you just gotta, like, get it out of the way. It's finding that balance, enough time to like actually build the thing, but also structure it and, save out the code and things. I envy studios that have had the time to do code review and stuff like that, because it doesn't really happen at film studios I've been at too much. Most of the time you just like, deadlines are, razor thin already. Anyway, sorry, I've gone off on another crazy tangent. Stuff in Unity is also retargeting, but mainly with humanoid characters. You can force it to other stuff as well. Super simple setup. You can have the skeleton name properly. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I like, one thing I use a lot, I use R3DS Wrap a lot. You guys might have seen me use it before in like transferring characters. It's just a really neat piece of software that when I need it, I just open it up, quickly access it, and churn something out. I feel like I need to turn Unreal into that kind of thing for me as well, where if I want to retarget a character very quickly, I just open up Unreal, run through a bunch of stuff, get all the animation I want, retarget it, and then just export it, Use it as a tool as part of a larger basis of what I'm doing with my rigs. Yeah. yeah, any other questions about anything I've talked about so far? All of these crazy amount of lines of code. Oh man, I'm nearly through my second glass of tea. Jeez. My voice is getting scratchy. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna go get another mug, and we'll come back and do something different. When I come back, I've talked enough. I should probably do something. Do something practical before ending the stream. I will be back in just a tad, folks. And I'm back. Yeah, I've noted it's been a very, in terms of people spamming stuff in chat tonight, the different sounds and videos that I have now, it's been much quieter on my rant tonight, so that's been useful. I think everybody did. There was. Oh, hold on. I think people missed this one. This one work? Me watching! Yeah! Okay, so anytime you want something, that's a great one to spam in chat. As well as just all the other Vanilla Ice ones that I've got in there. They're fantastic. I gotta keep expanding these until the list is like so long. It's just gonna be nothing but sounds all the time. Hockey. So, what do I want to do? What do I want to end up on? One thing I did want to do is I wanted to look at...
Yo, man, that's a great philosophy, but, like, can you put it back together
with quickness? I do need to put it back together with quickness. One thing I want to do is I've got a new argument in my spine component. Do compression scale, where you can compress them down, scale out, stretch them out, they scale to a smaller degree. But I had it set up before where I was directly punching those values onto the joints, which I don't want to do anymore because I want to do it on the manipulators which are driving the joints instead. So I would probably think it's a good idea to set that up now. before I forget what I was doing with it. I think I redid a little bit of squirrely stuff of my little squirrel dude before I left last week. I think I reworked my joint hierarchy a bit. Yeah, I've made it make a bit more sense for skinning and everything, but because some of the joints aren't in there anymore, it is not hooked up to any skin clusters right now. So, what I want to do, let me turn on these joints. So, basically when I'm doing stuff like curve outputs, so for my spine, it's basically a curve that is driving all of these joints here. Everybody who's watched my stream before knows my love of motion paths and everything, so I'm using a motion path with a bunch of locators down it, which is driving everything, as opposed to like a spline IK or whatnot. And I have all of these output manipulators. So these are the things that I want to do. So I think now, because I've changed my code, I can scale these up, and is it gonna scale those joints up? Oh, now this presents an interesting conundrum, because I'm gonna need to scale that directly. So not the space. I don't want to scale the space. I want to constrain, direct connect the scale to the manipulator itself. Reason being is I don't really want to use scale constraints because they don't really work with the way I've structured my rigs and how the general scaling of everything works. Because it basically interprets like, you know, scale from like above directly influences the scale of stuff below. So I just want it to be like direct values driving direct values, and it makes things a lot cleaner for keeping scale consistent in the future. Motion to call it MOPA. Ooh, I like that. You know what? I need to add like a new stream emoji, because I've got the classic 3 right now. We've got Team Locator, Team Transform, Team Join. I need to do Team Motion Path as well. Team MOPA. I'll add that down to my list of things to do. I need to do like an animated one where something goes along or whatever. Make it more incentive. So, let me take a look at my spine code. Because I should have my compression scale here. Stretch remainder. So for every joint, it's creating a mult plus a blend and an attribute to drive them. I believe. Oh yeah, because I haven't specified that variable, that boolean to be on. It's not doing it just yet. But rather than going to a joint, we want it to go to the output manipulators. I don't just want it. I've got the pelvis output. It's curve 5. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Where am I specifying the joints? Let's go output manipulator modules. No, transforms. Let's do that. So we got. I'll start output manipulator module. Manipulator. Oh wait. Transform. Yep. Oh boy. Actually, no. Let's just do let's do 2 modules. Then we can plus. I think these are they under the curve, or do I build them in here? All spine curve. All spine curve layer module, and then output modules? Manipulate output modules, boom. Okay, sick. So that'll give me all of them. So for I module in output manipulator module /me. And no, I can just get rid of that. So transform equals module manipulator transform. And this is the neat thing about having things in classes, sort of doing that whole object-oriented programming approach, is when I'm talking about like building a manipulator and things like that, because I've got a bunch of these, am I saying, are these variables? Not class variables. In like the init, when you're specifying self and that. Is that variable? Am I thinking of like MEL terminology? Variable? What am I calling these? This is the thing. This is when you're like, everything you do is self-taught. Or like learned through studios and things like that. It's like I never learned proper terminology of all this shit. Whatever stuff you're specifying in the init, in the self, you can always refer to those later. Because like, so I know I'm referring to the modules that I'm creating for these output manipulators, and I know in there I've got like my transform, I've got my input and output locators and things like that, so it's just easy to refer to things without having to specify specific strings and things every single time. Very good for hot swapping things out. Okay, that's all good. And we want to do a transform instead. Okay, let's see if this doesn't break. Cannot unpack non-iterable manipulator object. Well. Do I have any caramel dance and stuff? No, I don't think I do. That'll probably get me copyright flagged. Well, not copyright flagged. Probably get the stream muted. What else I got?
Water, water everywhere, so let's all have a drink.
I tried to set up a new one for the save redeem, but I don't think it was going through. Let's see if it's changed. Hold on. Save, did it work? No, it's not coming through. Damn it. I need to figure out why. But the other one does. Posture works. What was I doing? Okay, so why can't we iterate that? Let's print. Oh, because I didn't add enumerate. I'm a dummy. That be why. Sometimes the answer is just staring you in the face. Boom. Sick, sick, sick. Joints on. Normal. Let's turn off the geometry. Actually, no, we won't turn that on. Turn the stretch on. So now we should be getting some stuff. Are we getting some stuff? No. Oh, I need to get rid of that rivet thing as well. Why are you not going through? There is no blend. Oh, you know what? Because I have the compression off. There we go. Yep, those values are going down now. Sick. Can I crank that a lot? Yeah, there we go. So you can sort of see the scale happening much more effectively there now. Boom. Okay. I need to specify these names a bit more. Malt 0123 is not very good. But, yeah, at least I know that works. That is good. That is good. Thar be good. Something else I want to do. Cube was good. So scale seems to be working pretty good on these things now. Actually, well, hold on. Let's see what happens. Much better if I could visualize it. You know what? This is going to be stupid, but... Just grab these. Pelvis. 1, 2, 3. Oh my god, are you serious? Okay, there we go. Bones. I'm surprised it actually looks semi-decent from just doing a straight, flat-out scale on that, but okay. If it works, it works. Now I forget why I was even doing that. What did I want to test out? I've been bamboozled. Curve reference joints. Oh yeah, global scale. That was it. Hey, okay. Well, it's still scaling, and everything is staying consistent, so that's good. I think I had some issue on my human rig where the scale wasn't working. I think like the clavicles or something weren't working right, so it's not to do with the spine. At least there's that. The whole idea, yeah, that's pretty nice. Oh, thank you. Where it's sort of like you can control the multiplication value of each individual joint if need be, so you can sort of like sculpt the shape, as it were. But I've actually kind of found like just keeping them all pretty consistent has been okay for this character. I think I'm probably going like way overkill on this guy. Like I should probably just do it like a single control. I was just very curious as to see if I could get like a spine setup working. I might just like maybe a separate flower bag rig or something. Because it's like it's getting to the point like I just always want like consistent characters that I can test updates to certain things too. So if I like update a spine module, I can just run like this character or a human character and just see if, you know, the changes broke anything, or if I updated my legs, you know, the 2-leg guy is great for testing that stuff, and I don't have to worry about anything else going wrong at the same time. It's just like focused fixes. Every single control seems like a lot, but damn, having that control would be nice sometimes. Yeah, like this stuff I should probably not like present to animation unless they specifically request it, you know. It's more something I just kind of set behind the scenes. But yeah, I think just by default it automatically puts it across. Something I need to change. Oh, good lord. He ain't doing so good. Why is that happening, actually? Is that because of the squash? Is it just like freaking out? Yes, it is. Because the scale is messed up. Lovely. Anything else that I would like to do before I wind down the stream tonight? What's the time? Going for about 2 hours. Anything you guys would like to see me do? Basic fundamentals. Because otherwise it might just be porting over my tail module, my tail component, which I don't think I have done yet, from B. Could something similar to this also be used for rigging a rope? So, say a ropes are like interesting. I'd say like the way I approach my tails would probably be more appropriate for a rope. It sort of depends on what the rope is needed for. For example, like, I know, I didn't work on Wonder Woman, but I saw like the rigs for Wonder Woman's, what do you call it, lasso thing or whatever. And I think they had like specific rigs per what it needed to do in certain circumstances. Like if it needed to coil, if it needed to go out really far, things like that. Same with, there was like a rope on the Jumanji film I worked on that was like, had specific rigs for different lengths. But generally, what character can I build that has a tail that's not broken? I think, is T-Rex buildable right now? Maybe. Oh yeah, this is it's building all the skin clusters on this guy right now. So at least I'll build that. I don't know if it's going to build the animation rig. That'll be another cool thing while this is building. I can show that off. Like, in my rig core, this is what I used to, this is like my core script that I subclass off of to build all my characters. So this is like all the core information. And it's sort of like, there's a lot of stuff in here, but in a similar fashion to what I've got in other scripts. My build script, the actual, dot build that I use to basically build everything through my system, is very straightforward, and it's simplified in a way that you sort of get what's going on per section. So I start a timer, I do a bunch of preparation, I import and parent things, build a deformation rig. If there's a face, I build the face rig. I set up deformation, so skin clusters, wraps, things like that. If I want to build the animation rig, I do so. Import the shaders, do global control attributes, finalize everything, set defaults, and then end timer. Like, straightforward. But when you go deeper into these things, like if we go into animation rig, you see it's got a bunch of additional things that it does. Same with deformation, skin clusters, load them, copy them, build wraps, things like that. So what it was doing, it was like, I can tell where it was hovering before, because I've got like finished deformation rig. So then obviously next comes skinning to transforms and things. So you get a bit of information from this as well as like the general time taken for building everything. So, yeah, see, why I don't understand why my controls are building a weird direction, but let's just ignore that because they're still selectable. And I've still got my old settings. Yeah. So the way I sort of like, my tails are laid out in kind of a similar way, but have a bit more functionality based on the needs of what a tail is going to do. So like the underlying thing that drives the joints is still a curve. So it's a bunch of... if we go into animation, I can find my tail. Where is it? Here. I can sort of look at it specifically. Although all of these locators are so tiny. It might be a little bit hard to see. Can I blow these out? Boom. Yeah, so like each joint is driven by a locator, which is on a motion path based on a curve. So that curve is similar to the curve that would drive a spine or a neck. The only difference being I've got the controls that influence that curve, that drive the shape of that curve, are different. It's more of like an FK chain with a bit of IK functionality in there as well. Whereas, so like I've got these controls, so they're basically just sort of supposed to be like little point controls that hover above the geometry, but for some reason they're building with a 90-degree offset at the moment. But the idea is like you can manipulate these, translate them, or rotate them to sort of get like an FK effect. And I believe I've got offset controls in them. So this is my old rig system, so all my old controls, are they in here? Oh, balls. No, they might actually. Okay, they are there, okay. Oh, that's good. Like I've got these offset controls underneath them, so you can sort of like manipulate a section independently with these like little offset controls, so it doesn't influence the rest like these main controls do. But like theoretically as well, like I've got a bunch of spaces set up as well. So like, you know, if I plopped these into world space instead, you know, now this one won't influence that one and the subsequent ones because you sort of change it up. And I've also got the option to add stretch in here as well. So it's not, you know, right now it's trying to maintain the length as best as possible. So like if I was to grab this end one, place it, you know, out there, you know, it's going to try and just maintain the length of everything. Activate the stretch, and then it's going to, you know, compensate with everything sort of moving along to the end there. So something like this, I think, would be a bit more appropriate to a rope. The thing with ropes are complicated because you sort of need to give a level of simplicity as well as complexity at the same time. Like ideally in situations where they're just like, oh, we just need, you know, sort of need to kind of dot a few controls around and that's fine. You want to give them that. But then there's situations where, you know, like I was talking about with Wonder Woman, you know, they need to coil it up or something. So that kind of functionality is sort of like built in on a maybe not like a per shot basis, but like shots that maybe a rig that is specific to very specific situations or whatever. Yeah, but so, this kind of setup is like the layout of the controls and everything is fairly straightforward and basic and easy to sort of to do. And generally, I find that's what animators prefer. Like, you can layer in as much complexity to the rig and like the control structure, and it's like, you know, I've got 2 controls and it drives everything and it's crazy, but like if they can't understand how it's sort of how they can use it, then they just prefer a more simplified setup. It's just like, oh, just add, you know, a space, a parent constraint to it instead, because that's easier for me to deal with rather than a complicated system of underlying things driving other things that limit the frame rate to 10 FPS or something like that. It's like, can we do it with constraints and just 2 locators and, you know, it's runs at 24 FPS and I just have to manipulate it a little bit extra? I'm happier to do that. Like, animators prefer simplicity and familiarity, in my experience. So, always pays to talk to them and figure out what they want, yeah. I've never had an animator for the 1 or 2 control setups. They always want some degree of freedom. Yeah, like, I've mentioned this on stream a few times, Jesse. I don't know if you've been around when I mentioned it, but I worked on, like, this fox rig, a 9-tailed fox. It's in a movie that hasn't come out, so for some reason, like, a bunch of behind the scenes of the film came out. I saw it in it was for, like, a Chinese film. I saw it out there, so it's like, the character is out there. It's just the movie hasn't come out yet. I have no idea why. But I spent a bunch of time because it's like, it's a 9-tailed fox, obviously, right? Like, generally you'd want sort of like one layer of control that controls all 9 of the tails at once, just for simplicity's sake. But you'd also want controls down each individual tail because they'll need to animate them, you know, flapping around or doing specific things at certain points in time. And I must have spent like months, like just going back and forth with the lead on some things, just like figuring out, oh, can we simplify this setup down? Can we do it this way? I'm like, yeah, I can, but we're going to lose some like depth to like specificity. Like, you know, if you place the controls, you know, you might have to, you know, be more conscious of where it's moving because we've only got 2 controls and things like that. So there was like a bunch of back and forth on that. And in the end, like the person who was actually animating the rig was like, can we just strip all of that out and can we just do it like a basic setup with a bunch of FK chains and I'll just, you know, go the extra mile and animate it that way because it was like easy and familiar. Because like all of that additional stuff that I was doing, just trying to add this like automation just didn't make sense for like what was needing to be done. It was a bit of a roundabout. I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't any of the animators' fault specifically. Like everyone was jumping between shows, and there was priorities at different points in time. So this character just got sort of like lost in a shuffle or whatever. And eventually, it's just like, hey, let's just go with what works and what we know. So ever since then, that's always sort of been my mantra. Yeah. Do I have my motion paths? Tail. See, this is what I'm talking about. Like when I want to like find specific things, like that was the thing. I was like, I knew exactly where my tail stuff would be, and if I want to check out all of the outputs and things like that, I know exactly where they are. They're underneath the output manipulators. Actually, where is... Oh, the curve is under the nose scale. Yeah. We can grab that. Where I've got all of my base and up locators and aims. Yeah, no worries, Saya. Is Saya your actual name? Or is that just your... So I try and remember people's actual names through the streams if I can. But if people want that, that is. I'm happy calling people whatever they want to be. I don't want to accidentally dox someone. Yeah, one thing I want to do with... yes, awesome, okay. Well, it's easy for me to remember then. One thing I want to do with my motion path setup... oh yeah, I need to add like a flag in for this as well. Because one thing I've got is I've got on my motion path setup with the aims and everything, like each locator aiming at the next or whatever. It doesn't work in all the circumstances I want. Like I ran into this problem when I was working on my face rig, like just moving a lip up. Like if you're moving the middle part of the lip control up, because of my motion path, because that middle joint then aims at the next one, it creates this like wonky shape that I don't want, which I find I can get rid of if I don't use the aim system specifically. If I sort of use the, what is it, the follow of the motion path instead, but just use these controls as an up vector for that motion path instead. These locators as an up vector instead. That's something I need to do. Because that's something I was working, that's something I messed around with when doing my tread rig. Like actually using the up vectors of the motion path itself is like pretty good. Like, can I just do that quickly? 1, 2, 3. Oh boy. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Is it because I'm not doing enough? Yeah, that's probably why. EP. That's right. So we'll do that as base. Do this is up. We get our locator. This is base locator. This is up locator. So we got this one. Let's do motion path. Grab that one, do motion path. This is just a quick way of doing it. I would not do this normally. I have a script for making motion paths without all this faff that comes in with it. Like all these add double linears and shit that you don't need most of the time. Because what I want, like when you've got a motion path, is this is really nice for a lip, for example. So imagine this is like the top of the top curve that is driving a lip of our character, and you drag something up. You want this locator to sort of be like balanced in the middle if it's driving a joint down these curves, right? Because what's happening in my current setup is if I've got a bunch of joints down this curve that are all aiming at the next one in sort of like a sequence, like this locator isn't going to be flat like this. It's going to be like slightly aiming at the next point in the chain, which then, you know, if it's this locator that's driving a joint, which is driving skinning, you know, it's then going to like have this weird shape on the lip. So I kind of want to utilize, the rotation of the motion path a bit more if I can, I think. In certain circumstances, not every circumstance. Like when you've got follow. And the nice thing as well is you can use an object up. Like I can specify this locator as the up, which is how I was like, which is what I was using for my treadmill. So when everything's rotating around and you're moving it around, it's always going to point towards. So it doesn't like flip out or, you know, invert or anything like that. So in this circumstance, like the idea would be, you know, you got something controlling both these. Like I could just cluster these CVs. Cluster them. And pull that up, and if they're just sort of like both, you know, I can rotate them around, and then it's still gonna like, you know, it's gonna make sense. Like if this was, say, for example, a joint that was like driving those curves or whatever, like it's still got that like functionality built into it that makes sense, but it just keeps sort of like the rotation in between there, which I think is probably preferable in a lot of circumstances. Although it may wig out a little bit. Yeah, like, depending on how far you push that curve, it may wig out in certain circumstances, which may not be crazy desirable. But yeah, food for thought. That's something I'm going to probably look into a bit more when I get back. In fact, did I already set that up in my... Say, as this is like your first time in the stream, I love motion paths. I love them to death, and they're all I talk about, basically. Build motion path loop. I think in here I'm specifying. Oh yeah, I've got an option. I added an option to my attach transforms to curves via motion path. I can specify an up object. And if I do that, then it sets that world up type on the motion path. Yeah, it sets it up to object up, and then you plug in the world matrix of that transform into the motion path. Yeah, and that's how it works. So I think what I want to do is I need to put sort of like that kind of flag into my point on curve thing that I use. Points and curves. Oh wow, did not know about the object up stuff. I cheated a lot of it to work with. Yeah, like, I think by default it's, is it scene up? Where it'll take the, I guess in my, it's the y-axis is the up or whatever. So it's always the up vector. It's always going to try and point to y. So like, it's okay in most circumstances, but like, for example, Lucas, when I was doing the tread, right? Because it doesn't just stay pointed up, right? It goes around and loops back. So as soon as you start going like underneath, then they like flip out, right? Because it's trying to auto-orient up. So you can't do that. I think you can specify vectors and things like that. But again, like, having that object up is just really useful, provided you are maintaining that up transform in a place that's logical and everything. So basically, I'm using the same approach to my motion paths and everything as before, but rather than each locator aiming at the next one, I'm just using the rotation of the curve and just keeping that up vector there. So it's just basically getting rid of aim constraints and just using it all within the motion path system itself. Because, yeah, my point on curve thing, I believe I'm just building a bunch of motion paths, right? Attach transforms to motion paths. Yeah, I need to add something in here where I'd specify that, but I just need to make sure it doesn't break everything because I'm still building aims, and I'll need to add a toggle for that. Ho hum, ho hum. Yeah, I was doing a tail like that and wasn't getting the rotation correct for it to wag. Yeah, that would be why. In fact, I think like spline IKs have up vectors to specify as well, right? I think a lot of stuff in Maya has up vectors if you look. God. It's been a while since I've done a spline IK. Let's see if I can actually remember how to do it. Okay, handle. Boom, boom. I always instinctively group IK handles because I think there was a bug at some point where you had to, right? In order to move them around? Wait, oh no, it's the curve that you do for this, right? Yeah. Cluster U. And then on the handle, okay, handle. I think it's like a start and an end up vector or something, right? Okay, handle. What am I looking for? That's the solver. Ah, advanced twist controls. That's it, yeah. Because this is where you can specify up vectors, but I think as soon, this is something I've talked about in the past as well, like as soon as I think they go, those up vectors go beyond 180 degrees each, they flip out. That was something else I had to fix in that Fox character actually at some point, and replace him with a bunch of motion path things. Yeah. Seen machine gun belts rigged with splines. Yeah, spline IKs, like, they're not terrible. I think they're quite good for getting things done quickly. We just need to, like, something reliable you can just get out. They're quite useful for doing things like spines, tails, and in fact, like, you know, maybe, when did I start rigging at studios and that? That was like 2016? Yeah, like a while ago, let's just say that much. I would use them myself, because they got some cool functionality for stretching and scaling, where you can just like move, or I think if you just, actually, literally, if I just grab all of these joints, can I scale them? Yeah, scaling them on whichever axis they're aiming down. Maybe not that one. You can just get some like super useful functionality just from this, right? Like, that's great. Like if you're doing something like, you know, a branch or like a tendril growing from a plant or whatever, that's really cool. Yeah, stretching and scaling on spines and stuff is great. The only issue that comes up is like what I was saying, like when you start doing twists, like very specific character twists, like on tails or spines or whatnot, because this is what I was talking about on the fox. Like the fox was like flying through the air and doing loop-de-loops and stuff like that, and at a certain point the neck would like flip out, and they're like, whoa, why is that happening? It's because like these up vectors specified for the spline that was spline handle that was driving these things was like flipping out. Hello, cat. Welcome, welcome. Oh.
Kathy.
Cat. That's your calling card now. Oh, actually, Cat, we got a bunch of new Simpsons. Oh, actually, yeah, somewhat new Simpsons ones. We got... Me watching! And we've got... Was that one?
I'm seeing double here. 4 Krusties.
And I've got another one, which I can't show. Damn it. Because it's not working correctly. Unless it's working now. No. Damn. It's for my save one I've got. It's when Bart's like, save our seats. Will do. Hello. Oh. I need that. Very important. Oh, and also, what's the other one?
Then less Geo.
I love that movie. Then let's Geo. It's just so smooth, just putting on the glasses and everything. Then let's Geo. Oh, actually, I gotta show. Oh, actually, Kat, you'll like this. Any Simpsons fans out there? Can you guys see? Hold on, I can go bigger than that. Here we go. Woo! My friend, that was her gift to me. Oh, whoops. Wrong one. She knows what I like. I need to have like a redeem or something that just forces me to wear this hat for the rest of the stream or something like that. That'd be a good idea. Now my hair's all... I got hat hair despite the fact I wore it for 5 seconds. Well, what else? What else? We're just kind of like chilling at the moment. I don't really have anything else I want to talk about specifically before I head off tonight. Anything cool I can go through? Play Blaster UI. You guys should definitely build some Play Blaster thing. That's so useful. I've been doing them recently for work and stuff, and just having the ability to quickly make Play Blast is so useful. Have to go. Thanks for the stream, Robbie. Have a nice break. Yeah, catch you, Lucas. I'll see you in a week or two when I come back and start streaming again. Anything else I've been working on? Oh, actually, you know what I can show? Where are they? Under Human. Generic human. Models hand. Is it here? Ooh, yes. Yeah. So I'm messing around with making my own hand topology, because I have never been happy with hands that have been given to me through base meshes or anything. Like, I'm trying to incorporate 3 things. One, it can be very subdividable. So, like, at its core, it's nice and low res, like as potentially as low res as it can. Like, you know, for these fingers, I'm using basically cubes to lay them all out. The idea is, you know, if you subdivide twice or whatever, you can then de-subdivide and go back to like this very basic version and still have something that's somewhat usable. Landmarks are another big thing, which I think can be important sometimes. Like you can see on the knuckles and all of these areas, I'm specifying like an additional sort of like subdivision. The idea being when you subdivide them, mesh smooth, is you get sort of like this knuckle shape, you know, if you sort of like looked in the indent of your knuckle in the back, you get that. The reason is because those landmarks are incredibly useful when people are snapping topology to characters, right? Because generally, if you're working at a film studio, you'll have one base mesh for all human characters, because it's easy for modeling to quickly have access to this base mesh, because give it to texturing, its UV's already set up. You give it to rigging, it's the same vert order, so we can just reuse skinning. It works for everyone. The issue being, in my experience, when people are matching scans, is you'll get like the edge loops on fingers and stuff like start to twist around or go offset, and fingers get wonky if it's just like pure like loops and nothing else. So having landmarks here can be really useful, because then they know if you're using something like R3DS wrap or whatever to specify, you know, I want these points to be around. You want to say, like, I can just plop a few points on there and then instantly snap it up to where I know the knuckles are for sure and everything. So Pixar is straight flexing on people with their beans. Beans are balloon people? I'm not sure if I know what you're referring to. Are we talking about Pixar mums? And dumpsters and whatnot? Dump trucks? The other thing I wanted is I never really liked their body shapes are all over the places. Okay, so we are kind of talking about dump trucks and Pixar mums and whatnot. Fantastic. One thing I also don't like as well in most of the hand topology I've seen is how they approach the thumb. For a few reasons. Generally, you want this section of the thumb, like where it intersects, or like, you know, the division between where the thumb is and where the finger is. You want this part to be very, very strongly weighted to the finger. You don't really want any softness coming in from the thumb, because if you do, once you move the thumb in, you know, this part starts pushing in and the shape starts collapsing, you lose volume and everything. So I'm trying to like get a nice sort of like loop around that goes around sort of like the inner, this like portion of the thumb, the meaty portion, and just sort of like wraps around that whole area. So like if you just add in a bunch of edge loops, you know, it's all within that sort of like thummy area and doesn't really go anywhere else. Haven't really had a chance to test this out too much yet. In theory, I think this is pretty good, but I need to do a bit more in-depth testing of it. But like the idea being, you know, you smooth it again. Oops. And if I use that mesh. Oh, by the way, if you don't understand what I'm doing, I have like a reference hand here, and I'm setting it to make live, the little magnet tool here. So that means anytime you manipulate a vertex now, it's going to try and snap to that model. So I'm just grabbing all of these verts, scaling it up, and it instantly snaps all of them to it, which is a really quick way of just kind of like matching to an object which is somewhat close to it. But yeah, you can sort of see like you got pretty specific landmarks, which can be good also for sort of maintaining volume as the fingers curl. Yeah, something I want to play around with a bit more. And if it works out, I might, like, I don't know, sell a base mesh online or something. But yeah, I need to. It's not my speciality, but something I want to try and look at more. That'd be cool. Because I think this is the base mesh I think I was using before, which actually isn't too bad. Actually, yeah, it's quite similar actually in terms of how that's laid out. No landmarks, and I wanted to keep it simplified. Yeah. I think this is from, where did I get this from? Like Flip Normals and stuff? Flip Normals are quite good. I've also got a bunch of scans that I've bought as well, which I'm using for reference, and they are really not. Their base mesh is really not great. Yeah, so it is getting close to 12 o'clock here, so I'm probably going to start winding down the stream now. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be off next week. I'm on holiday. I'm going back home, which will be fun. And then the week after, I shall be back. So probably no stream. Well, definitely no stream next week, but probably a stream the week after. Yeah, any final questions or anything before? Yeah, I know. I'm stealing Kat's idea. Did you have the idea first? I think you did. I think, yeah. Hey! Well, Jordan, why are you watching me? Where did you see my link? What are you doing while you're home? I'm probably seeing you, Jordan. Jordan, your Twitch name is just... Well, I mean, okay. It is your name. It's on brand. Yes, it absolutely is. There's 2 people in chat that I'm going to see when I'm back. Yay! What was I going to... I need to save... No, I don't need to save that. That should be alright. You speak up, Jordan, while I'm going to end my stream. Because it is nearly 12 o'clock and I'm tired and I want to sleep and I've got work tomorrow where I'm going to fix some things before I head off back to Perth. So thank you very much to everybody who joined the stream tonight. Thanks to... Oh, thank you to Sayer as well for following. Hope to see you in the chat again soon sometime. Yeah, have a good week, folks. Stay safe, stay cozy. Don't work too hard. Be kind to yourself, be kind to everybody else. And I'll see you in the next one. What's a good thing? Okay, you know what?
Then less
Geo. Bye, guys.